Alright, let's go see what we have for seeds and get this indoor garden going. I had a few suggestions from people, strawberries, tomatoes, cucumbers, that kind of thing. So, let's see what we've got for seeds and what we can get started. Whew, and it's a bit chilly outside, so I think we're going to bring things inside here. Take a look at these seeds. Alright, now nobody judge my seed mess here. I've got this caddy many years ago, and I like to store the seeds just in a regular Ziploc bag, that way they don't fall out and go everywhere, you know. Now I want to find some things that are going to do good inside. I do want to try out the tomato idea, so here I've got some Roma tomato seeds. Give those a shot. Alright, I think I've got a plan, so take a look at this. Alright, I've got cilantro here, cumin, sage, so we're going to do those three as the herbs. And then I've got some onion seed here. We're going to try and see if we can get some sets. That way in the spring we can plant them outdoors. And then we're going to try some cucumbers. I'm going to get, you know, just some that are maybe an inch or two long, and we'll see how those do. Some Roma tomatoes. And then I'm a little torn. I've got some Tabasco peppers here, or I've got some sweet peppers, and these grow more like a little, kind of like a small bell pepper, but they're supposed to be sweet. So we'll see how those do. Now, let's go plant them. Okay, now that we've got the seeds picked out, we are upstairs at the indoor garden. So, first things first is soil. Now, this is a little bit... Now, this soil is a little bit on the old side. I used it in the spring, however, briefly. It was brief. But, as you can maybe tell, the soil is very, very dried out. So, we today are going to fix that. I'm just kind of evening it out here. Here we go. So it's roughly half and half. I got two boxes here. So, first thing we're going to do is just add a little bit of water. Be a little more than you think at first. Next, we just get dirty. This one needs just a little bit more water. Alright, you see that? Now it's nice and kind of dark. The problem with soil when it gets all dried out like that is it becomes hydrophobic. So instead of absorbing the water and watering your plants, it just sits on top of the surface and drains down this side of the container. So really doesn't get your plants nice and watered if you start off with a bone dry soil. Now give me just a minute while I go get my hands clean. Alright, much better. Now that we've got the soil kind of nice and hydrated, we're going to take our little cups here, and I like these things because they're made out of silicone and a good hard plastic, So they're good to be reused year after year.
Fill these guys up here.
Okay. Now here I've got 4 cups. I think that'll do. We've got one for each pepper and one for the onions. Now the herbs I think we're going to do in the hydroponic setup. So, alright, first one is Roma tomatoes. Just gonna make a very shallow hole there in the center of our cup. And I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 seeds down just to be on the safe side, make sure we actually get something germinated. We can always clip back the other seedling at a later point in time. Alright, next up is our sweet peppers. Again, just make a nice little hole in the center of the cup. Next up, we've got the Tabasco peppers. Now these seeds are interesting. They're a nice bright red. Now lastly is the onions, and we're going to plant these just a little bit differently than the other ones. So onion seeds don't really have to be covered much. You kind of just spread them out over the surface of the soil and lightly, very lightly just press them down. That is exactly what we're going to do. Now I dumped out quite a bit of onion seeds in my hand, and we're going to plant these pretty thick. But that's okay because onions don't mind being moved all too much, so when they sprout we can just take them out of the cup and separate them a little bit and stick them in one of these trays here. Now I am going to sprinkle just a teeny bit of soil on top of them. And we'll very lightly press them down. Alright, last but not least, we have to water these girls in. So in order to keep them in the grow tent over here, I am going to dump the soil out of this container. Sorry, it's off camera, you guys can't see that there. Alright, we're going to get all the soil out of this first container. And we're going to use this as a little watering tray here for our plants. Stick all 4 of them in there. Now watering, especially when you're using a big jug like this on a small kind of pot here, you've got to be very, very careful not to disturb the soil too much. And I like to kind of spin it and water from the sides, that way I don't disturb my seed there in the middle. And we'll just water lightly just until we get some coming out of the bottom there. Alright, and that's all there is to it. Alright, now let's get this hydroponics setup going here. Alright, now this one is going to be set up a little differently here. We got the power cord. They give us a little bit of nutrients. I have to read the directions on that, but I suppose that you would just mix that with water. And then we've got some cocoa, or maybe just some plugs anyway here that go on the top. And some holders for said plugs. And then there's a little water pump down in there. So I guess first things first, let's get our reservoir filled up with water. If you look right over there, it's got a max line there of 5 liters. Alright, we'll just get our reservoir here filled up with water. Okay, I did go ahead and put these little plugs in here, and what I'm noticing now is without the reservoir filled up all the way, these are not long enough for the little plugs to be touching the water, so important note there. Alright, then we just stick our plugs there. And what I like here is they've got this little cap to add some water to the reservoir without taking the whole thing out there. So that is a nice touch. Alright, now I think this thing is pretty neat. I've got it plugged in here so that I can test out the light and the pump, which turns on and off automatically. So that's kind of a neat feature. Alright, so we'll just put the top on and let these plugs get nice and saturated with water. Alright, so the first seed I've got here is cilantro. Now for some people cilantro might be kind of a hard herb to grow, but really it just likes the cold, you know, it doesn't like to be hot, otherwise it causes it to flower, which is not what we want when we're looking to eat the cilantro. Next up, we've got cumin. And now cumin is an interesting herb, and honestly, it's not one that I've been able to grow in the past, so we're gonna give it a shot here today and see if I'm able to get anything out of it. And finally, we've got sage. Alright, now before we go, I am going to open up the tent here. And we'll see. Oh, we've got one plant just barely wanting to come out of the soil there. Looks like these guys are about ready for watering. Temperature's good, but the humidity's a little lower than I'd like it to be, so... Alright, we're just going to give these girls a little bit of water real quick. Alright, then we're going to make some room here for the new plants. Bring those guys over there. Alright, that should be good. Maybe not. And there we go. Not too shabby. Alright, there we go. Alright, that'll be it for this one. Check in next week and we'll have an update on the hydroponics setup and the indoor garden. And if you got anything out of this video whatsoever, please give it a like and consider subscribing.